Voting was once a responsibility that was directly tied to education, reason, and virtue. The classical liberal arts traditions emphasized logic, civic understanding, and the pursuit of truth because the idea was informed men, only informed men, could sustain a free republic. Now, I feel like too many people vote based on outrage, identity, and emotion with zero grasp of the long term implications. We've essentially traded our reason for political rhetoric and we've lost civic virtue in favor of partisan slogans. Restoring the republic requires restoring the standards in education. So we know that in the classical liberal tradition, voting was tied directly to certain qualities. In early republics like Athens or the United States, I guess the Americas around 1790, suffrage was limited often to educated, property owning men who were deemed capable of rational and reasonable deliberation. The idea was that a republic's survival depended on the citizens who could reason beyond their own self interest, understand the laws, and then prioritize their rationale or prioritize what they were voting for uh, based on the common good. For example, James Madison wrote in the Federalist Papers about factionalism, blind loyalty or passion that was overriding principle, which aligns with those points of virtue and logic. Today, the way people vote is almost antithetical to the informed, educated voter from that classical liberal arts tradition. And what I see now is emotion driven voting. There's studies that come from like the American National Election that consistently are showing that people vote based on party loyalty, candidate charisma, or hot button issues fueled by moral outrage or moral identity or virtue signaling rather than by the policy details and the critique of those policy details. Social media amplifies this. A 2021 MIT study found emotional content spreads faster online than just sharing information and facts. The long-term implications of this are that most voters don't dig into fiscal projections or constitutional nuances. The turnout spikes with divisive culture war issues and not realistic budget debates or ramifications. Is this new? Not entirely. The rhetoric over reason lament echoes back to the 19th century, where you had yellow journalism or Tammany Hall's vote buying schemes. Um, what's changed is the scale of this. There's 24/7 news cycles, X posts, and social media are constantly making emotional appeals. Civic virtues decline has been hard to measure. Voter turnout is up since the 1990s, but that doesn't mean that voters are more virtuous or more informed. It might mean that voters are just angrier because they're voting on emotion. Restoring a standard to voting sounds appealing, but it gets tricky fast. Who decides what informed or virtuous voting is? Literacy tests, civics tests, property requirements were once the way they justified that, but they were abused and excluded people. A modern version, like a modern civics test, might cut voter turnout or skew towards certain groups, which risks elitism or bias. Plus, humans are emotional inherently. Expecting logic and ignoring how passion can drive change is ignoring things like abolition or the civil rights movement. Historically, though, this idea has never fully been realized. Even back in those early republics, like I mentioned, voters weren't all philosopher kings. They had local biases, they had their own economic interests, and there was always misinformation. The informed citizen has been a goal, but not a universal reality. So the truth here is mixed. The classical ideal was real, but often romanticized. And today's mess is also real, but not totally unprecedented. The republic's wobbling between reason and chaos is not a fall from grace. It's a tension that's baked into our style of democracy. Fixing it means much less restoring a lost golden age and more adapting to integrate those older, more traditional principles into our louder, messier world. So tell me what you think. Are there any practical ways that we could nudge voters towards reason without breaking the system? What I'd personally like to see is that more voters take the time to actually be educated and practice reason and logic in the classical liberal arts sense.